Executing My Exodus with your host, Ashley D.
Good evening, everyone. I want to welcome you to episode 10 of Executing My Exodus with your host, which is myself, Ashley D. I know I owe y'all an apology, okay? Last week, I was supposed to come out with this episode, but I had so much going on, okay? So I do want to ask that you please forgive me for being a week late, but like I said, I had a lot going on. I was working my full-time and my part-time jobs. I was in the middle of pastoral anniversary at the Creek. You all know I serve a second church, so we had service. We had rehearsal Monday night, service Wednesday night. I had to decorate Saturday night, and I had 3 services this past Sunday, as well as a repast afterwards. So I was booked, busy, tired, exhausted. I could not get it together in order to pre-record my new episode. And to put the icing on the cake, one of my children was sick. You know, one of my adult children, if y'all know, you know, my parents are my kids. So one of my kids was sick, and so trying to work both of my jobs. I worked from home a couple of days last week to look after one of my parents who's been kind of under the weather the past 2 weeks. Thank God they are feeling much better. So for those of you who did know, you know, thank you for your prayers and checking in on my mom. She was under the weather. So with all that going on last week, I could not get it together. I text Leo, was like, listen, we ain't gonna be able to pre-record this week. My body is shutting down, and I'm listening to my body. So again, I apologize, but we're back this week for episode 10 of EME. So I'm so elated and so excited that you decided to tune in with me on tonight at 7 o'clock for episode 10. So I have so much to talk about with you all tonight. We have been talking about the purpose of waiting. That has been the trend the past 2 episodes. Now we're on the 3rd episode. This is part 3 of the purpose of waiting. Truthfully, I could go on with this topic for a couple of months, because there are so many reasons why we are sitting in the waiting room, waiting on God to answer our petition. But because there are some things I want to talk about, we're coming into the holiday season, Thanksgiving and Christmas, and there's specific things that I want to talk about in the next 2 months. I am going to wrap up the purpose of waiting on tonight. So before we go into part 3, I do want to do a quick recap of part 2. 3 weeks ago, we talked about the purpose of waiting part 2, #draw me near. So in that episode, I did things a little differently. I talked a little bit on the front and back end, but I did also include a sermon that I did honoring my father for his birthday on that episode. So if you have not watched it, please go back and watch it. I got a lot of messages saying how much they enjoyed that episode and how I did things differently there. And so if you haven't seen it, go back and see it. But to do a small, quick recap of that before we go into part 3, we talked about the purpose of waiting, part 2, #draw me near. So in that episode, we talked about at times we have gotten so far away from God that we must be willed back in to make us realize that we are nothing without him. Oftentimes we start off good with our relationship with God. You know, we do our daily devotionals, we spend time with him, we serve him wholeheartedly. There's nothing that can separate us from the love of God. But at some point, in the midst of asking God or making our petitions known to him, our relationship begins to decline. You know, so we make him aware of the things we want and need from him, but sometimes God does not fulfill our requests because he knows that our relationship with him will decline. We will replace him with the very thing we ask him for. And because he's a jealous God, he will not have anything or anyone before him, we're still sitting in the waiting room because our level of intimacy with him may not be as strong as we think it is. And because we have the tendency of replacing things with him. Replacing him with those things. So we end up becoming a part-time lover of God or a conditional lover of God. So in that episode, we were able to talk about how God desires a full-time committed relationship with him. And most of all, he wants to know that he can trust us with the blessings that he gives to us. Like relationships today, God requires consistent conversation, love, affection, devotion, and intentional time with him. We can only do that by consistently drawing near to him. So that's what we talked about 3 weeks ago in part 2 of the purpose of waiting, #draw me near. Let us draw near to God. Let us not get away from him. Let's continue to build our relationship with him and not replace him with the things that we're asking him for. That's just a brief synopsis of part 2. So now we're in part 3, which is going to be the conclusion of the purpose of waiting. And this time is #the P's of waiting. That's P'(S) of waiting. So there are still several reasons why we are still sitting in the waiting room. I continue to say that throughout these episodes. We are sitting in the waiting room, waiting on God to answer our petition and give us the things that we're asking him for. So to dive right into this new topic of the P's of waiting, the number one P of the P's of waiting, which is something we talked about in episode 8, is preparation. Sometimes we're still sitting in the waiting room because he's trying to prepare us. Preparation is important because it allows God to cultivate us in a way that we can handle what we are petitioning him for. The cultivation of our minds and spirits will keep us from forfeiting or mishandling the things that we have asked God for. Again, the cultivation of our minds and spirits would keep us from forfeiting or mishandling the things that we are asking God for. So that goes back to the scripture, Romans 12:2. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind. And Ephesians 4:23, be renewed in the spirit of your mind. We have to be cultivated. Our minds have to change. Our spirits have to change. God has to mold us and shape us and cultivate us internally and externally. We cannot ask God for new things in our lives, thinking the same and doing the same things. When we incorporate new things in our lives, it requires us to think differently, move differently, and even walk away from some old things in our lives. It requires us to clean up or clear out old habits and motives. In order to have and do something new, we have to do things differently. So that means we have to be prepared. Like I said in episode 8, when we did talk about, #Lord prepare us in part 1, I said, have the same energy that you have when you ask God for all of the things that you need and want in your life. Have that same energy to ask him to prepare you for those things that you're asking him for, which requires him to mold us, shape us, and cultivate us so we know how to handle it properly. So we don't mishandle it or forfeit it. Sometimes, and then even in the process of preparation, sometimes God really just wants to see what we're going to do to prepare ourselves in addition to what he already is going to do. And I bring that, pause on that. So I constantly ask my friends, they'll say, this is what I'm asking God for. I want him to do this. I want him to do that. This is what I'm seeking God for. And I'm like, okay. That's good. That sounds nice. But what are you doing to prepare what you asking him for? What you doing? Like, what are you taking out intentional time to do in order to prepare yourself for these different things that you're asking him for? Okay, let's bring this down to our lives. Like me, I one day want a family, I want kids, all these different things. And so, I hear that from my friends often. But I'm also asking, so what are you doing to prepare for this life that you want? What are you doing to show that you're going to be a good spouse? What are you doing to show that you're ready for kids? Have you paid some bills off? Okay, it takes money to take care of children. Have you paid some bills off? Have you increased your income in some kind of way and eliminated your debt? All these different things, like they say they want a new house. Have you cleaned up your credit? Have you seen what you can qualify for? What are you doing like as the prerequisites for the things that you're asking him for? That's something to think about. So sometimes God really just wants to see what we're going to do ourselves to prepare ourselves for the things that we're asking him for, in addition to what he's already going to do. So it goes back to the old saying too, when you do the same things, you get the same results. But when you start to do things differently, you get different results and even better results. So we have to be prepared. Anything that has good quality takes time and preparation. You all know, when you go and get something cheap, you'll go through it real quick. But when you buy quality stuff, it took time and preparation to get it to that particular quality. That's what happens with us. That's why sometimes we're still sitting in a waiting room, because he's preparing us to be a better quality of what we are right now. So anything that has good quality takes time and preparation. Change is good. Being prepared is really good. Embrace preparation while waiting in the waiting room for God. Allow him to mold you, shape you, and cultivate you into the image of him. And that's mind, body, and spirit. So number one, the first P, and we talked about this 2 weeks ago, but I wanted to add a little extra to it. Number one, we have to prepare while we're still sitting in the waiting room. The second P is a good one. Let's talk about patience. One of the reasons why we are still sitting in the waiting room is to build up our patience. Now, for some of us, that's kind of a curse word, you know what I'm saying? Because some of us are patient, some of us are not. But waiting develops our patience and dependency on God. Patience is a virtue. And it's actually one of the fruits of the Spirit. God, go back to Galatians 5, okay? Like 22, 23. Them verses up in there. Patience is actually a virtue, and it's a fruit of the Spirit. So when I thought about this, and it's a nugget that the Lord dropped in my spirit. When I think about patience, I really think about how patience fluctuates in our lives, okay? So go back to when you were a kid, or parents when you started having kids. You know how impatient we were as kids and how impatient your kids were. And if they want juice, they want it right now. If they want food, they want it right now. If they want toys, they want it right now. When we were children, we were very impatient. Very impatient. We didn't want to wait for nothing. So our parents eventually had to teach us how to be patient. So we're learning how to be patient. We're growing up. So we get to adolescent years, teenage years, adult years. At this point, we are very much aware of what being patient is. We have patience. There's some things we want in our lives. There's some things that we know we're going to have to go through, and couple of like different circles and dynamics we'll have to go through in order to get to the level that we want to. And it requires patience, and it requires diligence and consistency, all these different things. But then at some point, and I don't want to put an age to it, but I want to say roughly when you get to like, I'm going to say 50 and up, all that patience that you have learned to have and built up eventually begin to decline. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know what switch goes off, But when I tell you, the older you get, the thinner your patience get. I mean, listen, my 2 adult children, honey, one of them specifically, can be the most impatient person you will ever meet. When they want something, they want it right then and there. They don't want to wait for it. And sometimes I gotta be like, hold on now. Be patient. It's coming. It's coming your way. Just hold on for a second. Nah, this is what I want, blah, blah. Hold on. And then I have to remind myself, you the one who taught me how to be patient. Like, how you gonna go back? That's when it goes back to your kids, your parents turning to your children. That's really real. Because at some point, their patience level begin to decline. They become very impatient. They want what they want right then and there. They don't feel like waiting. All this. So that's what I really think about with patience. But even down to us in our lives, we get impatient. And instead of waiting on God, we begin to take matters into our own hands. And it never goes right because we're moving out of alignment with his will. So, which takes me to another P that I really didn't plan for. Thank you, Holy Spirit. So it takes me into one of the reasons why we're still sitting in the waiting room is because the Lord is trying to protect us. Okay. So he's trying to protect us from the dangers that we may come in contact with during the process of waiting. He's trying to protect us from what we're asking for, maybe because it's not even really meant for us altogether. And sometimes he's trying to protect us from ourselves because we move out of alignment and take matters into our own hands in order to speed up the process so we can get to the end goal or the end of the promise that we ask God for because we're impatient. Then we can run into detrimental dangers that we may not be able to bounce back from, or that puts us into a long recovery period. So then, next thing you know, we crying, we clapping back at God like, Lord, why you allow this to happen? This ain't the Lord. You happen to you because you step out of alignment with what he said. You decided to become impatient and take matters into your own hands. Now you upset. No, you happen to you. You couldn't patiently sit in the waiting room for him to prepare you for what it is that you're asking him for. And you learn that it's either not for you or that you were ill-equipped for it. So, patience is very important, okay? Patience helps us to build our trust in God to work on our behalf, even when we can't see it physically. We have to trust and know that God has our best interests at heart. In the midst of waiting patiently, we are able to experience the intimacy of God and his goodness and kindness towards us. Because of our patience, God will unlock blessings and doors beyond our wildest imagination because he knows no matter how long it takes, we're going to wait on him and sit at his feet, waiting patiently for his instructions and the gifts that he has designed specifically for us. Be thankful and grateful for the delays because it could be the Lord protecting you for some things that you are nowhere near ready for. So embrace patience. Okay. Embrace. I know it's hard because we get impatient sometimes that we want what we want, but embrace patience. So then I want to go to the next P, purpose. Sometimes we're still sitting in a waiting room because the wait reveals our purpose and intentions. The revelation of your purpose is revealed. It shows your true intentions on what it is that you're asking God for. It reveals what's really in your heart, what's really on your mind. So let's think about it. It puts us in a place of, when we're sitting in a waiting room, it puts us in a place of saying, are we asking God for these things to be added to our lives for selfish reasons? Or is it because we've seen someone else have what we're asking him for? Or is it possible that what we're asking for, is it a need or is it a want? Is this a temporary want or a long-term need? A long-term need? Or is it a temporary inquiry or something that would be meaningful and add value to our lives? And the last question I want to hit you with is what you're asking God for. Does God get the glory out of it? Or is it just personally for you? I believe us sitting in the waiting room gives us the time to really sit back and reevaluate what we're asking him for. Is this still something that I want? Is this something that I need? Is this adding value to my life? Is this, God, do you even get the glory out of what I'm asking you for? Is it even for me? Or is it for somebody else? Am I mirroring what somebody else have? Like, is it like I'm just trying to stay in the running with everybody else? Is this what you really have for me? It gives us sitting in the waiting room reveals our true purpose and intentions of what we're asking God for. And it also reveals our purpose in this world and in the kingdom. The wait allows us to build an intimate relationship with God, which will eventually reveal our purpose during the wait. What is it that God is calling us to do in this particular season? Again, the wait reveals the purpose, our purpose, not only in the world, but in the kingdom. What is it that God is calling us to do in this particular season? At some point, we have to stop bombarding God with all of our requests and actually ask him, what is it that you want me to do in this season? Matter of fact, let's go a step further. How can I serve you? Because sometimes we get in the habit of just asking God, this is what I need. This is what I want. This is what I want you to do. But have you ever taken a step back and asked him, how can I serve you? How can I serve you in this season? God, how can I glorify you in this season? What is it that you would have for me to do in this season? I feel like when we can get to that space, our purpose will be revealed, which is ultimately God's purpose for our lives in that particular season. You know, I often ask my friends, those that I'm truly close and connected to, that I have like real, we're close. And every once in a while I ask them, how can I serve you in this season? Because this season, you might need prayer. This season, you might need me to be around more often, be present. This season, you might just need space. This season, you might need help being cultivated. Those different things. Like, that's what happens when you build an intimate relationship with someone. That's what God wants. So sometimes we're still sitting in a waiting room because he wants to build that intimate relationship. Like, okay, I don't want you to just keep contacting me or praying to me for things that you want, but also ask me, what is it that I want you to do in this season? So sometimes we're still sitting in a waiting room. Number one, because it reveals our purpose and true intentions of what we're even asking God for. And it also reveals our purpose in the world and in the kingdom. If we really take out the time to ask God what it is that he wants us to do in this season. Last but not least, the last P I want to talk about is promise. Sometimes we're still sitting in a waiting room because God is still fulfilling his promise on his time. God will always fulfill his promises, but on his timing, not ours. Philippians 1:6 says, being confident of this very thing, that he which hath begun a good work in you will perform it until the day of Jesus Christ. We can rest in knowing that the Lord will fulfill every promise he made for our lives. God is a provider and a promise keeper. We all know him to be that. He has everything orchestrated a certain way. We just have to trust him to fulfill the promise. The fulfillment of the promise expresses God's faithfulness to us. God is faithful and fulfills each and every promise he makes to us, even if you don't receive anything else in your life. God's gift of Jesus Christ, along with those twins, grace and mercy, are the greatest gifts we could ever have. So God is going to keep his promise. He's going to show himself faithful. We just have to wait for him to reveal and to fulfill his promise. So again, let's go back. We need to prepare. Sometimes we're still sitting in a waiting room because we are being prepared. We're sitting in the waiting room to develop our patience and dependency on God alone. We're also sitting in a waiting room because he's trying to protect us from some things that we don't need to go through. And if we listen, we may not go through them. If we wait, may not go through them. Then also, it shows we're still sitting in a waiting room because it reveals our purpose and true intentions. And also our purpose in the world and the kingdom. And last but not least, we're still sitting in the waiting room because God is fulfilling his promise on his time. So, what are some of the benefits and effects of waiting on the Lord? Number one, we can build a relationship with him. Last episode, no longer be a part-time lover, but a full-time lover of him. While we're waiting, we can spend intentional time, enhance our relationship. Just like we take out time to build relationships with the people that's around us, we can have and spend intentional time with him and build an intimate relationship with God. We also can have total dependency on him. Sometimes we get so dependent on our friends and family, but sometimes we have to, again, draw closer and nearer to him. Sometimes we have to forget about those around us. Not all of them going to understand. So at this point, we have to become totally dependent on him. We can only be dependent on, we can't depend on man all the time, but we know we can depend on God. So one of the benefits of actually waiting on him is being able to have total dependency on him, because it is him who can change and shift anything and everything in our lives. Another benefit of waiting on the Lord, it builds strength and endurance. I often sit back and look at some of the things that I've been through, and I'm like, Lord, I don't even know how I got through that, but I know it was because of you. I know it's because the strength you gave me and the endurance you gave me that I even made it this far. And for that, I give you glory and I thank you, and I give you, there's nothing that I wouldn't do for you. So in the midst of waiting, it builds your strength and your endurance. And one of the things that I learned is, when your strength is built and you get that endurance, there's nothing you can't face and come out on the other side on. Like, when God can see that he can trust you, he'll give you even more. But that comes from your strength and endurance being built up. He knows that when he gives you those blessings, you're going to manage them well. You're not going to forfeit it. You know, like, I don't know how to explain that right, the way that I'm thinking about it, but the benefit of like really waiting on the Lord builds your strength, where you can endure and you can face anything, knowing that God is on your side. He got your back. There's nothing that you can't accomplish, that you can't push through, because he got your back. And that comes from just waiting on him and knowing who he is and how great he is. And he's not something you could fit in a small box. He's greater than anything that we could ever even imagine. So it builds our strength and endurance knowing that God got our back. I'm trying to explain that right. I feel it, but I don't know if I'm explaining that right. And I hope you catch what I'm saying. But it builds our strength and endurance to get through anything that we ever have to face, because we know who has our back and who's on our side. Another benefit of waiting on the Lord, it prepares you for the promise. I don't even know what to add to that. It prepares you for the promise. And even in a way, it gives you insight on what that promise is, how it's going to come. I feel like the more you build your relationship with him, the more he begins to reveal things to you. You begin to see how things are moving in alignment. To a place where you like, okay, God, I see why you got me here. I see why I'm still sitting in this space right now, because you're showing me like everything begins to come in alignment. It begins to work together. All things work together for the good of them that love the Lord, who are called according to his purpose. You begin to see how things are coming together. So it prepares you for the promise. And you're like, okay, God, I thank you for where I am right now, because you're preparing me for the promise that you have specifically for me. Another thing is it protects you from danger. Listen, I thank God. When I tell you I thank him for preparing me, for protecting me from danger. There are so many things that I've actually seen that the Lord has protected me from. It may hurt sometime when certain things don't go my way, and I'm like praying like, Lord, I was hoping this was going to work, and I was hoping that this was going to come through. But then when I really sat back and fully evaluated that, I said, oh God, I thank you for protecting me from the danger that I could have come in contact with if I would have stayed with that particular situation, or if I would have went through with that particular situation. I'm grateful for the protection that he has over my life. One of the benefits is that it protects you from danger. Another benefit of waiting on the Lord is that you begin to find out more about who you are as a person and as a believer. I can honestly say that as I spend more time with God, I spend more time sitting at his feet and building a relationship with him and listening for his voice, I begin to learn more things about myself. Just because you're older, it doesn't mean that you stop learning things about yourself. Because you reach a certain title, it doesn't mean that you have reached your fullest potential as a person or as a believer. You begin to learn more things about yourself, things that you like, things that you don't like, things that you can do, things that if you really take out the time to allow God to really stretch you and cultivate you and mold you and shape you, you begin to really learn more things about yourself while you're still sitting in that waiting room. What it is that you can do. One of these pastor, family member of mine, I don't think they ever thought they could do the whole virtual space. You know, when the pandemic happened, we had to go to the virtual space. We couldn't go inside church. So that means they had to preach to them chairs and them pews and, preach like they were preaching to a whole congregation, and it's some things you don't know that you could do until you actually get put into a position or put into a space where you have to learn and adapt to those different things. And so while you're sitting in a waiting room and you're waiting on God to do some things and you allow him to prepare you and you get yourself acclimated to different things and changes in your life, you learn more about yourself and what you're able to do for the kingdom, what you're able to do for yourself, what you're able to do to push yourself forward into the next dimension that God is going to have for you. So you begin to learn and find out more about who you are, what you can do, and who you are as a believer. How you can minister to others, how you could do things, how you could serve God better while you're waiting in the waiting room. Another benefit or effect of waiting on the Lord is something that I have tapped into. And that is we have time to rest because we're not worried about anything because it's all in his hands. I'm going to say that again. Another benefit of waiting on the Lord is being able to rest, knowing that he has everything covered. Everything is in his hands. Episode 7 was about the anxiety of waiting and how we allow anxiety, fear, worry to cloud our minds often while we're still sitting in the waiting room. But when you actually remove all of those things out of your mind, you get a certain peace and rest knowing that God got you during this waiting period. He's going to do everything that he said he's going to do. Is it going to require you to do some things differently? Of course it is. We talked about it. It's going to require you to be patient. It's going to require you to prepare. It's going to require you to trust him and his promise. But you can also rest assured knowing that he has you. So one of the benefits of waiting is being able to rest in him, knowing that he has it. You no longer have to worry because he got your back and he's going to cover you and protect you as long as you trust him and wait patiently on him. So again, we talked about the different P's of waiting, the purpose of waiting, hashtag the P's of waiting. We talked about how important it is for preparation, how important it is to be patient, how important it is that he protects us during the process of waiting. We talked about the purpose itself, how you can find your purpose in the midst of waiting, and how it reveals your intentions, your real intentions. Reevaluate what it is that you're asking God for. And then also for you to actually see his promises in full effect. Those are the different purposes of waiting that we have to keep in mind and that we have to incorporate in our lives. So, of course, no mind having a transparent moment, there are several things that I ask God for, that I'm looking for God to do in my life. And I believe that he's going to do them. I've seen and he has revealed his promises to me. But I also know that I'm still sitting in a waiting room because I know that my needs and wants right now does not supersede the assignments that he has given me. Let me say that again. I know there are some things that I want and desire for and pray to God about that I really want to transition into. But I also know by spending time with him and really seeking him that I am currently sitting in the waiting room because the assignments that he has given me supersedes my needs and wants right now. And as time has been going on, he's been revealing to me why I'm here, why he has put me in these particular places and spaces right now in my life, and I'm embracing it. Sometimes it could be a little down, like have me a little down because I'm like, Lord, I want to do this, I want to do that, and because, you know, I'm strong-minded, I'm corporate, and I think outside the box all the time. I'm like, okay, Lord, so low-key, I know you want me to wait, but, you know what I'm saying, if I do this, if I do that, you know I could get to the end goal. You gonna let me do that? And he be like, no, I need you to wait because I need you to do this first. I need you to do that first. And there's some things that I want to do with you first, cultivate you, mold you into. You know, I want to prepare you some more for some things for the things that you want. So I need you to be patient and wait for me to do that. And I promise you, I'm going to fulfill my promise. That's my truth. I can honestly say that. And you all know I'm single. I don't have kids other than my adult children. I want to be married. I want to have kids. But can I take a step back and say, am I ready for it right now? Y'all see how hard I go in these streets. I work a part-time, a full-time. I serve 2 churches. I have my own podcast, webcast right now. Thank you, Lord, I'm out of school. But when do I have the time to be somebody's wife and somebody's mama? Let's talk about it. That's some real truth that I don't mind being transparent about. It's going to require me to slow down. Am I slowing down a little bit? A whole lot better than I was. But I'm going to eventually have to walk away from some things in order to step into that element. But I also know that God has given me assignments in this season that I need to fulfill first. That actually, when I think about it, it's going to prepare me for that next dimension. And I've gotten to the place that anything that tries to interfere with the assignments that God has given me, I have no problem chucking the deuces to. And when I tell you I don't mind doing that, I have the gift of goodbye. Because I understand my assignment is more important than the things that I'm going to eventually want at some point. And little do I know that these assignments is going to help prepare me for the things that I'm asking him for. And I'm perfectly okay with that. Sometimes it can be a little hard. It can be a little challenging when you see people in your space and your element growing. They got the marriage. They got the kids. They got the house. They got all these different things that I desire for. But I know that my assignment in this season is going to get me there. And I'm willing to trust God to take me through the necessary steps and circles that I need to go to in order to get to that place. Are you willing to do that yourself? The things that you're asking God for, have you taken a step back and say, God, am I really ready for what I'm praying to you about? What do I need to do to prepare for it? What is it? Like I said, some of us are asking for houses. Are you cleaning up that credit? Okay. You got to have good credit. Some of us are asking for better jobs. Are we a good steward over the one that we have? Are we updating our resume? Are we advancing our skills for the new jobs and the new promotions? Or are we still sitting with the same mindset, doing the same things as we've been doing the past 5 or 10 years and expecting for God to give us greater and enlarge our territory? What are we doing differently to show him that we want more? Are we trusting him in the process? It's just so many questions that I want to throw at you, that I want you to consider. I can personally say that I am trusting him to lead me and guide me into the things that he would have for me to do. And in the process, I'm asking God, how can I serve you? What is it that you want me to do in this season? How do you want me to serve you in this season? What is my purpose in this season? What are you trying to move me into? And slowly, because I am building that intimate relationship with him, he is revealing those things slowly but surely. And I'm walking into it. Sometimes it's scary. Sometimes I don't even know whether I'm coming or going, but I'm trusting him throughout the whole process. Why? Because I have total dependency on him. So I know I hit you with a lot. I hit you with patience. I hit you with purpose. I hit you with his promise. I hit you with preparation. The fact that he protects you. All these different P's of waiting. It's important. We're sitting in a waiting room for a reason. And if you really sit back and think about it, I promise you, you can find yourself in each of those P's of waiting. You can find yourself in there. So, I hope something was said to encourage you tonight. And I want you to understand too that I know sometimes we get tired of waiting. We go through the anxiety of waiting. It gets a little stressful. It gets a little discouraging. But there's purpose in the wait. Embrace the purposes of waiting. And I promise you that if you choose to wait on him, sit at his feet, he will give you more than you even asked him for. God's blessings and the doors that he opened is far greater than we could even imagine or think about. So embrace the wait. Wait on him, because there are benefits of waiting on him. And the benefits are far greater than the small things that we even ask him for. So again, I hope something was said that hit your mental, made you think and say, okay, Lord, I'm sitting in the waiting room. There's some things I need to do. Some things I need to reevaluate. I hope something was said to make you think and even encourage you and even give you a sense of peace about the wait that you're currently in. Again, I thank you on tonight for tuning in with me. This is episode 10 of Executing My Exodus with Ashley D. I love you. I look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks. We're going to talk about something new in regards to the season. We're about to come into Thanksgiving and Christmas. I know some of you are about to start buying gifts and buying food and getting ready for the holidays. So we're going to talk about a couple of things in relation to Thanksgiving and Christmas coming up soon. So again, I thank you for tuning in on tonight. I love you with the love of God. I love you and there's nothing you can do about it. And I thank you again for your continual support of Executing My Exodus with your host, Ashley D. I love you. God bless you. Have a good night.